Kari,
Hi, how are you?
oh, I don't know what
Hello.
happened with the invite there, but I'm just glad that you're here now.
Yeah, no, I was told that you would let me in when it started.
Really? Well, I think that somehow you had a different room that it was sending you into, because it didn't say anything about admitting you until I resent that request. I don't know.
That's strange.
But the important thing is that you're here now. So
I am.
thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you for joining. Thank you for having us.
Oh, totally. I was so impressed with that other podcast, and I thought, wow, what a really interesting conflict that people don't know anything about. And I think that's the point of this discussion is, well, first tell me what your role is over at the Refugee Council.
So in the Norwegian Refugee Council, I work in the regional office for Central and West Africa with advocacy and media. So I'm the head of advocacy and media for that region, covering amongst other countries, Cameroon.
Okay. And what are some of the other countries that are in your zone, your purview?
We are also working in the Sahel, so in Burkina Faso, in Niger, in Mali, in Northeast Nigeria, and also in Central African Republic and DRC, Democratic Republic of
Do
Congo.
most of these Sahel countries, do they have similar issues that they have to deal with?
Yeah, in the list that we launched this year, 9 out of 10 of the crises are in Africa, and 8 out of 10 is in West and Central Africa. So
Yeah.
it's overrepresentative. They're overrepresented in the list.
So do you think that contributes somehow to the fact that they seem to be ignored at such a large degree?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that when there's less attention in the media, when there's less talk about them in big global meetings, then it's also easier to ignore the people who are living in these conflicts.
Yeah.
And yeah, also the financing part makes it more difficult to respond to the humanitarian crisis.
What are some of the larger contributing factors that have caused similar conflicts in all of these in this region? Like why is it a continuous problem for so many countries there?
I think there's very different roots of the conflicts in the Sahel if you compare to Cameroon and DRC. But I think it's unavoidable to look at the way that colonial history has affected these countries, where the state is not very accountable to its populations, and the borders are not made in an organic way. They were drawn up by European powers often.
Okay. So what does that translate to as far as a refugee crisis? What are the specific personal factors that are affecting people and chasing them into refugee status?
So the violence and conflict most often threatens, makes people flee to the neighboring village. It's quite rare, even if most Europeans and probably also in the US think that most people flee to Europe and the US. That is not at all the case in the region where we work. So for the most part, people flee to the neighboring village, trying to get away from the conflicts, and obviously then leave behind whatever they own, and often also their livelihoods, since most of them are, or a lot of the people are, farmers. In Cameroon in particular, there's been the attack on villages in the northwest southwest has led to them being burned, so it will take quite a long time also for these people to regain their houses and their livelihoods.
Now, who's attacking?
It's both the state, non-state armed groups and the military forces.
Mm-hmm.
Indiscriminate violence from both parties, I'd say.
It's unimaginable for a lot of us to think about that happening.
Yeah.
Okay, and So the council, how did they determine that this was the most unreported conflict? What measure did they use?
Yeah, so it's our head office, Norwegian Refugee Council's head office, who have made these. There's an indicator on political will, there's an indicator on the media attention, and there's an indicator on humanitarian financing. And Cameroon was, for the second year in a row, the country that scored the lowest or the highest,
How,
depending
yeah,
on how you, yeah.
yeah.
So it's not a very fun competition to win, but it's, yeah.
So what does the Norwegian Refugee Council do to advocate for people who are coming from this place?
So I would say that our country teams are working with local authorities, and it's in the country. We are trying to highlight this at a regional level, and our offices around the world are trying to raise the issue with the political leaders in countries that could have an influence over the Cameroonian state to find a political solution. But in the country, it often looks like it's very at the local level that we are advocating. So we would advocate for the resolution of the conflict, but also then first and foremost to be able to access people with humanitarian assistance, and to reopen the schools for children to be allowed safe access to schools. So it's addressing all the small parts of what a conflict looks like for the people on the ground.
Okay. And I suppose you work with other agencies as well?
Yeah, we work with fellow international organizations and also local organizations who help us distribute aid and also carry out activities.
What types of aid are they most in need of?
I remember when I was there in 2019, late 2019, we met people who had fled in Buea in southwest Cameroon. When they came to the city, one of the first things that they were asking for was plastic sheeting so that they could build a shed in the bushes because the rainy season was coming. Then they were also very concerned about having enough hygiene facility or hygiene kits. So I remember one woman who we distributed soap to, she cut the soap in 20 small pieces to be able to redistribute in the bushes to her family. And that says a little about the lack of adequate humanitarian response in that particular. That's just one example, but I think that's quite telling of the desperation of the population.
Dramatic, yeah, it
Mm.
really is. Wow, I've never heard anything like that.
Mm.
Now, Cameroon as a country is a pretty diverse, like multi-intersectional country in its location, because the north of it is the Sahel, right, and the western part of it is closer to West Africa, in biodiversity, for example.
Yeah.
And then other parts of it are more like Central and the Congo, for example, that border it. So it's at a crossroads in so many ways.
It's also called the mini Africa. It's supposed to have all the climate zones and such.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Where do you see the resolution of this conflict? Do you see that? How do you feel as far as the elements necessary? I mean, I'm asking you because I know you have a master's in peace and conflict studies, so you must have kind of taken this apart and spent a lot of time looking and thinking about what a resolution could look like.
I think it's important that the resolution comes from within, and that there's an increased demand. I think the Cameroonian population are quite tired of war. 8 out of 10 regions in Cameroon is affected by conflict. Not the same conflict, but there is violence in 8 out of 10 regions in Cameroon. So we should hope that it comes from within. It's quite a tough authoritarian regime, so it's quite you have to be courageous to speak out as a Cameroonian in the country. But then obviously, sorry.
No, you continue.
No, obviously there's also a need for increased political pressure from both the African fellow states and internationally. It's quite appalling that such a conflict can just rage on without any, or at least not much outspokenness from global leaders that we often see ask for peace in other conflicts.
So I know that because it's, as you say, considered mini Africa, it must have tremendous natural resources there, and I suspect that, like any other African mineral or resource-rich country, there are Western interests that have large extractive, for example, operations there. I mean, I'm just wondering if there's something or pressure that people from around the world can apply on these international actors in some way to have an influence on the resolution of the conflict.
Yeah, I wouldn't know the details in terms of resource looting, but as you say, we can probably assume that there is interest in that. Yeah, I think what people can do is teach themselves more about neglected crises. Try to request that from your preferred media outlets and get a better coverage of what is actually happening around the world, so that we're not all absorbed in one crisis at a time. I think the world can take in more than one big conflict, and I think we should, try to do that. Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to the BBC Africa Today podcast, which is where I heard the interview originally. Was great. Yeah, so there are multiple conflicts though happening within Cameroon, right? Yeah.
There is. Go ahead.
I said, how many different ones can you cite?
So there's the insurgency in the far north, which probably most people know as the Boko Haram. There's also effect in the Cameroon. Cameroon is the second most affected country of the Lake Chad Basin conflict, with a lot of attacks also within Cameroon, and a lot of internal displacement, as well as Nigerian refugees who have fled from northeast Nigeria. Then in the east of the country, there is a refugee crisis that dates back to 2012, where there was a lot of Central African Republic and refugees who came into Cameroon and have lived there for quite some time. And then there's the northwest-southwest political crisis that began in 2016-17.
Wow, there's so much going on there.
Yeah.
Well, do you have anything else you wanted to add or request people to take a look at the webpage for the Norwegian Refugee Council, and they can always support your activities?
Yeah, that would be nice. The Neglected Crisis report is out, and that's a good starting point if you want to learn some more about crises that we don't hear a lot about in the worldwide media.
I super appreciate you chatting with me about it and informing my audience just about this. It's just another thing to bring your attention to if you're an engaged citizen who cares about people all over the world. You should know about this and do something if you can. Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting us and for making this part of your podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you, and have an awesome day.
Likewise. Bye.